Good morning. Welcome to Julia the Bulls, part 10. So, let's see. Yesterday, we left off where my ex woke up and the wolves were gone. She's been realizing that it's almost fall. All the animals are starting to migrate and change colors into their shedding and changing and growing in hairs that are going to be camouflage for winter. The birds are leaving. The wolves called for her and she's like, no, I'm going to go to sleep. It's going to be okay. Woke up, they were gone. So this is called part 2, My Ex, the Girl. The wind, the empty sky, the deserted earth. My ex had felt the bleakness of being left behind once before. She could not remember her mother very well, for my ex was scarcely 4 when she died, but she did remember the day of her death. The wind was screaming wild high notes and hurling ice-filled waves against the beach. Capujen was holding her hand and they were walking. When she stumbled, he put her on his shoulders, and high above the beach she saw thousands of birds diving toward the sea. The jaegers screamed and the sandpipers cried. Oops. The feather. Right there, sorry, something happened. The feathered horns of the comical puffins drooped low, and Capujen told her they seemed to be grieving with him. She saw this, but she was not sad. She was divinely happy going somewhere alone with Capujen. Occasionally, he climbed the cliffs and brought her eggs to eat. Occasionally, he took her in his arms and leaned against a rock. She slept at times in the warmth of his big sealskin parka. Then they walked on. She did not know how far. Later, Capujen's Aunt Martha told her that he had lost his mind the day her mother died. He had grabbed Mayax up and walked out of his fine house in Mekoriuk. He had left his important job as manager of the reindeer herd, and he had left all of his possessions. He walked you all the way to the seal camp, Martha told her, and he never did anything good after that. To Mayax, the years at the seal camp were infinitely good. The scenes and events were beautiful color spots in her memory. There was Capujen's little house of driftwood, not far from the beach. It was rose gray on the outside. Inside it was gold brown. Walrus tusks gleamed, and drums, harpoons, and man's knives decorated the walls. The sealskin kayak beside the door glowed as if the moon had been stretched across it, and its graceful ribs shone black. Dark gold and soft brown were the old men who sat around Capujen's camp stove and talked to him by day and night. The ocean was green and white and was rimmed by fur, for she saw it through Capujen's hood as she rode to sea with him on his back inside the parka. Through this frame she saw the soft eyes of the seals on the ice. Capujen's back would grow taut as he lifted his arms and fired his gun. Then the ice would turn red. The celebration of the bladder feast was many colors, black, blue, purple, fire red. But Capujen's hand around hers was rose-colored, and that was the color of her memory of the feast. A shaman, an old priestess whom everyone called the bent woman, danced. Her face was streaked with black soot. When she finally bowed, a fiery spirit came out of the dark, wearing a huge mask that jingled and terrified Mayax. Once, in sheer bravery, she peeked up under a mask and saw that the dancer was not a spirit at all, but Naka, Capujen's serious partner. She whispered his name and he laughed, took off his mask, and sat down next to Capujen. They talked and the old men joined them. Later that day, Capujen blew up seal bladders, and he and the old men carried them out on the ice. There they dropped them into the sea, while Mayax watched and listened to their songs. When she came back to camp, the bent woman told her that the men had returned the bladders to the seals. Bladders hold the spirits of the animals, she said. Now the spirits can enter the bodies of the newborn seals and keep them safe until we harvest them again. That night the bent woman seemed all violet-colored as she tied a piece of seal and blubber to Mayax's belt. It's an Inglogitide, she said. It's a nice little spirit for you. Another memory was flickering yellow. It was the old men beating their drums around Capugin's stove. She saw them through a scarf of tiny crystals that was on her breath on the cold night air inside the house. Naka and Capuchin were on their hands and knees, prancing lightly, moving swiftly. When Naka tapped Capuchin's chin with his head, Capuchin rose to his knees. He threw back his head, then rocked back on his heels. Naka sat up and together they sang the song of the wolves. When the dance was over, the old men cheered and beat their paddle-like drums. You are wolves! You are real wolves! They had cried. After that, Capuchin told her about the wolves he had known on the mainland when he went to high school in Nome. He and his joking partner would hunt the wilderness for months, calling to the wolves, speaking their language to ask where the game was. When they were successful, they returned to Nome with sled loads of caribou. Wolves are brotherly, he said. They love each other, and if you learn to speak to them, they will love you too. He told her that the birds and animals all had languages, and if you listened and watched them, you could learn about their enemies, where their food lay, and when big storms were coming. A silver memory was the day when the sun came over the horizon for the first time in winter. She was at the beach, close to Capuchin, helping him haul in a huge gleaming net. In it was a beautiful white whale. Out of sight on the other side of the whale, she could hear the old men as they cheered this gift from the sea. The whale was a mountain so high she could not see the cliffs beyond, only the split clouds. Capuchin's huge, black, frostbitten hand seemed small as it touched the great body of the whale. Not far away, the bent woman was dancing and gathering invisible things from the air. Mayax was frightened, but Capuchin explained that she was putting the spirit of the whale in her Inglogitide. She will return it to the sea and the whales, he said. Walking the tundra with Capuchin was all laughter and fun. He would hail the blue sky and shout out his praise for the grasses and bushes. On these trips, they ate salmon berries, then lay in the sun watching the birds. Sometimes Capuchin would whistle sandpiper songs, and the birds would dip down to see which of their members had gotten lost in the grass. When they saw him and darted away, Capuchin would laugh. Fishing with Capuchin was murky tan in her memory, for they would wade out into the river mouth where the stone weirs were built and drive the fish into nets between the walls. Capuchin would spear them or grab them in his hand and throw them to the men in the wooden boats. Occasionally he skimmed after the biggest cod and halibut in his kayak, and he would whoop with joy when he caught one, would hold it above his head. It gleamed as it twisted in the sun. Summers at Seal Camp were not as beautiful to Mayax as the autumns and winters, for during this season, many families from Mekoriok came to Nash Harbor to hunt and fish, and Capuchin was busy. Sometimes he helped people set nets. Sometimes he scouted the ocean in his kayak as he searched for seal colonies. During these hours, Mayax was left with the other children on the beach. She played tag and grass ball with them, and she pried prickly sea urchins off the rocks to eat the sweet meat inside. Often she dug for clams, and when Capuchin returned, he would crack them open and smack his lips as he swallowed them whole. The Eskimos from Mekoriok spoke English almost all the time. They called her father Charlie Edwards, and Mayax was Julie, for they all had two names, Eskimo and English. Her mother had also called her Julie, so she did not mind her summer name until one day when Capuchin called her that. She stomped her foot and told him her name was Mayax. I am Eskimo, not a Gusak, she had said, and he had tossed her into the air and hugged her to him. Yes, you are Eskimo, he had said, and never forget it. We live as no other people can, for we truly understand the earth. But winters always returned. Blizzards came and temperatures dropped to 30 and 40 below. And those who stayed at hunting camp spoke only in Eskimo and did only Eskimo things. They scraped hides, mended boots, made boats, and carved walrus tusks. In the evenings, Capuchin sang and danced with the old men, and all of their songs and dances were about the sea and the land and the creatures that dwelt there. One year, probably in September, for the canvas tents were down and the campground almost empty, Capuchin came into the house with a sealskin. It was a harbor seal, but had so few spots that it was a rare prize. "We must make you a new coat," he had said. "You are getting big. Since your mother is not here to help us, I will do her work. Now watch and learn." The skin was metallic silver gold, and so beautiful that even the velveteen parkas of the children from Mekoriuk paled by comparison. Mayak stroked it lovingly as Capuchin laid her old coat upon it and began to cut a larger one. As he worked, he hummed, and she made up words about the seal who wanted to be a coat. Presently, they became aware of the distant throb of a motorboat. The sound grew louder, then shut off at the beach. Footsteps crunched. The cold air rushed in the door, and there was Martha, Capuchin's aunt. She was thin, and her face pinched. Mayax disliked her immediately, but she was spared the necessity of speaking nicely to her, for Martha had words only for Capuchin. She talked swiftly in English, which Mayax barely understood, and she was angry and upset. Martha shook her finger at Capuchin and glanced at Mayax from time to time. The two were arguing very loudly when Martha pulled a sheet of paper from her pocket and showed it to Capuchin. "No," he shouted. "We'll see." Martha screamed, turned around, and went toward the boat where a white man waited. Capuchin followed her and stood by the boat, talking to the man for a long time. The next morning, Mayax was awakened as Capuchin lifted her up in his arms and held her close. Gently, he pushed the hair out of her eyes and, speaking softly in Eskimo, told her she was going to live with Aunt Martha. "There's a law that says you must go to school, and I guess you should. You are 9 years old, and I must go to war. The government is fighting somewhere." Mayax grabbed him around the neck, but did not protest. It had never occurred to her that anything that Capuchin decided was not absolutely perfect. She whimpered, however. "Listen closely," he said. "If anything happens to me, and if you are unhappy, when you are 13, you can leave Aunt Martha by marrying Daniel, Naka's son. Naka is going to borrow on the Arctic Ocean. I shall make arrangements with him. He is like me, an old-time Eskimo who likes our traditions. He will agree." Mayax listened carefully, then he put her down and hastily packed her bladder bag, wrapped her in an oilskin against the wild spray of the sea, and carried her to the boat. She sat down beside Martha and stared bravely at Capuchin. The motor started, and Capuchin looked at her until the boat moved. Then he turned his back and walked quickly away. The launch sped up a huge wave, slammed down into a foaming trough, and Capuchin was no longer visible. With that, Mayax became Julie. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of part 10, Julie of the Wolves. I will see you soon.